So let's do some more analysis, conceptualizing the spiritual realm and spirituality in terms of basically electromagnetism. And so in this system, or in this framework, what people call spirituality, we would call an electromagnetic connection between objects, to where they're separated, but they're somehow bound or influencing or moving each other, right? You could have two magnets, and if you move one magnet, the other one's moving, you would say, oh, these two magnets are separate by every means I can measure. But somehow, like when I move here, this one moves up, just like, you know, my finger's connected, because if I move one end of it down, the other end of it moves, right? Like and ultimately when we dig into that, we go, like, why is the front of the pin moving as I move the back of the pin? And it goes, oh, well, there's actually an electromagnetic connection between the back and the front, so that they move together. So with spirituality is that you're noticing or creating an electromagnetic connection between things. So the main one that everyone likes to focus on is breathing. So if you control your breath, or if you do intense exercise, right, that's all breathing practice, like all the cardio and pranayama and even stillness and stuff like that is all breath-based. Stillness is all trying to polarize or magnetize the blood through deprivation, or withdrawal, or self-control, mediation, moderation. The blood has it has an intrinsic desire for oxygen, so there's a pull, right? When the oxygen is near the blood, there's a magnetic pull, and the oxygen is sucked into the hemoglobin from this sort of magnetic gradient. And so if you control your breathing, or you breathe differently in such a way that you're trying to get the blood to have the strongest actual grip on the air, the oxygen, if you desaturated your hemoglobin to like 50%, all of the blood volume is going to be intensely trying to draw in oxygen. It's going to have a very, very strong draw. That's creating one end of a magnet, and then the other end of the magnet is the oxygen. And so when you desaturate, your blood is suddenly like very strongly pulling on all the oxygen. So just a little bit of a field line, or just a little bit of a magnetic connection is all you need, and then all of a sudden the movement of the stuff that the blood desires, which is the oxygen, will move the blood just the same way that you move the positive end of a circuit or a magnet, and that's going to move the negative end, even if they're not touching. And so when you do that, and you relax and notice, you can see that, oh, everything's touching, everything is connected. So people have these unification experiences that come from noticing the magnetic connection between all things, or this spirituality. If you do practices that increase the charge, they increase the polarity, it makes it easier to notice this. Like it's always there. Like it's always there. It's almost like saying, how could you notice water if there's no current in the water? If the water's still, it's kind of difficult to notice water. But if it's moving, then you go, oh, I notice water. So if you increase the polarity or the magnetism of a system, it will make it more noticeable. So any system that it wants to go in a particular direction, there's a desire, that means that there's some current flow. Like these current flows come in different packages, different shapes, different whatever, and that creates different magnetic fields at quote unquote different frequencies. So like the shape of the circuit of like the hemoglobin to the oxygen, determines the frequency of that magnetic field and if that magnetic field is going to influence you. The same way that the shape of an antenna determines if the electromagnetic field is altering that antenna. So with different types of fasting, food, like not having food, everything in the body is wanting those compounds. It's wanting that energy. It's wanting these big packets of like electrons and protons, right? If you break everything down into this molecular biology atom thing, every molecule is a big chunk, an amalgamation of positive and negative charges, which you could view as frequency. Positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. You know, wrapped into the shape of a protein, or wrapped into the shape of a sugar molecule, or wrapped into the shape of whatever. As you withdraw, as you withhold these systems, that intense desire, that want, right? We feel these frequencies, we feel these electromagnetic pulls as desire. So you have a desire to eat. You have a desire to think or to know or to understand, a desire to judge, a desire to do all these things. These desires are just, the ball wants to flow that direction. If you restrict or control, or at least interact with and feel these desires, you know, better to feel what's going on than to try and control it. But if you feel these desires, then you get a capacitive system. A capacitor being like there's a block between a high charge here and a low charge there, and you put a shield in between them, and let that charge build up on one side. That's called a capacitor. And so that capacitor, there's magnetic fields between one side of the capacitor and the other. And so there's all sorts of different ways to charge the body, both within itself. So every single cell in the body is a capacitor, right? So if you make sure that charge is going, then the between the inside and the outside of the cell is magnetically connected. Like when the capacitive membrane of the cells are working, the inside of the cell is not separated from the outside of the cell. There's actually magnetic connection between the two things. And but if you kind of let go of cultivating these charges, then you lose the membrane potential. Like cancer cells have a screwed up resting membrane potential. There's no charge. They have no magnetic connection between their inside and the outside. So what happens at the cellular level can also happen at the individual level. And so when people are having like mental pathologies, spiritual pathologies, all that, the prescription is usually fasting, forgiveness, not judgment, like non-thinking, to do breath control, to discharge all of to make the blood polarized again via vigorous exercise or intense stillness. Like intense stillness and vigorous exercise are to the blood the exact same thing. So people that have no control over their mind can control their mind with vigorous exercise, and then that causes the blood to polarize. That polarization of the blood causes it that the blood is mechanically attached to the world around it, so you stop feeling isolated, alone, disconnected, etc. And then there's things that give like an extreme rush, right? Like basically fighting and sex activates these like deep systems. And that releases a ton of energy between the two poles, so that you feel that there's an obvious connection. Like one way to feel that positive and negative is connected is to actually connect them and have an energetic discharge. Like the circuit completes and the energy flows. That's what happens if you get into any sort of adrenaline rushing sort of situation, or that's literally sexual energy discharging, fighting, like killing, stuff like that, is like it causes the connection. You cause the connection between life and death. So there's a bunch of like ritualistic spiritual practices that are based off of either connecting these circuits, which you could say is ultimately destructive. When you actually connect positive and negative and make them one, you get an extreme energetic discharge that lowers the resting energy of the system and ultimately damages the system, to where it's like through withholding, self-denial, the system builds up more and more and more charge and becomes more and more connected to everything without any sort of energy loss. That being like the right-hand path, right? And then the left-hand path would be to actually connect the positive and negative. So that's where you see all these philosophies of like, especially in Kabbalah, where they think that the light and the dark is the same thing, and they like connecting them. So that's all sorts of transgressive magic, degeneracy, violence, all that stuff is where you connect positive and negative, and that releases truth. Is the circuit flowing? It flows, and you can see the truth. You can see the connection between positive and negative, and that would be kind of like that's the false messiah, is that actual active connection. It's the destructive force, whereas the true one is that invisible connection between two magnets, right? If you have two ends of the circuit connected magnetically, that's the righteous arrangement, or the good path. Whereas if you have positive and negative, and you connect them through the circuit and use that connection to basically, I'm using everything works this way, but the electricity flows, and then you can harvest that electricity for to run your society, or get your dopamine levels to whatever level, or to have your body be healthy. You're releasing energy to fuel the system, but that energy has to come at a cost. There has to be a sacrifice of something good flowing to something bad, and then that sacrificial energy connects the two things, and you have the whatever. But if enough polarity is connected, then there's this magnetic system, which is how the body works. That's why all the cells are capacitors. That's the more end of like the breatharian, the living off of spirit. You're moved magnetically by your soul, by God, and it doesn't require any energy. It doesn't require any knowing, any understanding, any sacrifice. It doesn't release any power. But everything works like that. So you look at like just chastity, chastity, fasting, poverty, anywhere in your life where you feel desire, that's your discovery, or your acknowledgement of basically an electrical circuit, two poles and a thing, and that's where all of your desire comes from. And then if you play with that desire, then you can develop physical, mental powers, right? Like if you have a desire to know or to understand, if you have a practice of not knowing, then that can build up this charge, because it's like the mind wants to do this thing, so you withhold it. It wants to go that way, and then you'll find that it's actually already connected to the thing that you want to know without knowing. And so that magnetic sense versus the electrical sense is the shift between I don't know. There's a lot of things that are on this spectrum or whatever. On the spectrum.